Okay, so hello and welcome everyone. And we are getting into it. Okay. So, currently, right now, I am creating visuals for a couple of projects. This girl here, I'm actually going to create a music video. Okay, and instead of using myself, I'm going to use this girl. I haven't really decided what I'm going to do or how I'm going to put the video together. But I know that I need the basics, which means that I know I need, like a person, and I need them looking like they're singing. So, however, I decide to put the video together, that will come to me. It usually comes to me once I start just doing it and really don't think about it. So, animation is a very big challenge for me because it's so tedious and it kind of forces me to slow down, right? Um, because, I mean, I draw. I have been doing this for a long time. You would think that the shit would come easy, but it's very challenging. But I do appreciate being able to do what I can do. Um, I actually was supposed to get into animation, I want to say maybe in like 2020, but I was so intimidated, And this goes back to the institutionalization of certain things because, you know, I feel like I can't do this without having some type of schooling. Now, I have done research. They have a free animation school I found on YouTube. There are other creators. But before I started to really get into animation, I would watch other people's animation films. And I'm talking about some of these people, they've been doing it for years. Some people have been to school. Some people have not been to school. Some individuals were just starting off. They only been doing it for like a year or two versus individuals who have been doing it for like 10 plus years, and so I study the difference. I study the movements because I have a little experience in doing things myself. There are certain things that I can empathize with and that I can see in other people's animations. And when I'm going through this world of animation, I'm just like, you know what? This is my new start. This is my fresh start. In the beginning, yes. And even still now, I am very intimidated by the animation. But what I see is it's the same concept that I tell people when people want to learn how to draw, but they're intimidated by it. I usually tell them about Picasso. In Picasso's earlier years of his work, he was into realism and he was really good, right? But it wasn't until he got into abstract to where individuals saw his true artistry and had an appreciation for it. So if you think about it, you are already Picasso. All you have to do is just do it. You know what I'm saying? And I wish that I had known that. But at the same time, you have to appreciate your experiences. So I appreciate because I do have a serious problem with perfectionism. And animation definitely takes me out of that because I'm trying to tell you, the more I be trying to perfect the animation, I get drained, I get tired, I get frustrated. The shit is not fun anymore. But when I'm just free with it, just doing it, learning along the way, having a ball, having a good time, I go through with it and I actually have fun and enjoy it. Okay, so, and the thing is that it took me a while to actually enjoy it, because I'm not really into doing things just because I can and I know how to do it. So I gave you the situation with Picasso, right? So when it comes to me animation, because this is new to me, And then when I look at new beginners animations, individuals who don't have any schooling or knowledge about animation, they just jump right into it. I'm just like, damn, their shit is so unique, you know? And don't get me wrong, a lot of people like the perfectionism of things, right? Because when you watch cartoons, you see it. When you see animated movies, you see it. So I'm just like, yeah, all of that is good. Maybe one day I will get to be in, I don't know. I like original. So, I mean, I told myself, I say if I just jump in and do it and I just do it, then I'm going to create my own signature. And this is what I have been craving when it comes to my artistry with like painting and drawing and all this type of stuff. And who would have known that I would find it in animation and that I found it in animation and the shit is intimidating. You know what I'm saying? But the confidence comes from feeling the fear of it and doing it anyway. So that is the will. That is the decision. I'm deciding. I have no idea where this shit is going to take me. I'm deciding to do it and I'm going to do it how I want. I'm going to be proud of it. So here we are. Okay. And I do not spend time with comparing. And it's easy not to compare myself to other people because individuals who have less experience outside of being programmed and institutionalized by the structure of art, I'm just like, I like their animations more because it's unique. But at the same time, I'm just kind of weird in that way because I'm the type of person to where I like flaws. I like flaws. I love flaws. Why is that? Because it's like that is what makes you custom. You know, like, you get with somebody with a gap, or let's say you meet somebody with a gap. They got a real cool personality, real great, but the number one thing that you remember about them the most is that gap. So, you have a friend that's just like, yeah, you see so and so, and you're just like, you mean so and so with the gap? Yeah, that's them. It's like a signature. That is them. There's a painter on YouTube, and her style of painting is the same way every time. And I be thinking to myself, do she ever get bored with doing, with having the same style? But my thing is that if I had that style, I wouldn't get bored with it. I mean, I'm not bored with looking at her style of painting. I absolutely love it, and it's the original, the imperfection is that is the substance. That is the substance. And when it comes to this woman and her paintings, that is what I'm attracted to. Propaganda and then like symbolism and symbolic pieces. Cause her artistry, she's kind of dark, right? But well, she's a tattoo artist, okay, but she also paints. So it is a little dark, right? But it's so symbolic. It's so she's saying something without like directly saying it. It's like she's expressing it in her own way. I don't know how to explain it. It's just amazing. Okay. So, this is my new venture, and this is what I'm going to be using as to how to help me deprogram my institutional abuse when it comes to dealing with my artistry and, just the structure of things. You know, like I said before, some things you can't unlearn, but we can start over elsewhere and introduce the self teacher. Okay, so this here, this story, this animation film right here, this is a project that I'm working on too. So the music video goes along with this project as well. Okay. So, and even when it comes to this story is outside of my box, but at the same time, it's something that I wanted to do too. So now we're going to kind of like get into imagination, right? Imagination is a very powerful tool. You know, I notice it's more powerful than what people think, because it exceeds beyond opinion, fact, or whatever. And people can really gravitate to imagination, especially a very toxic imagination, right? I like to help individuals because imagination is beautiful. Absolutely. But when we don't have something to anchor us, then it becomes escapism and then it becomes very toxic. So, toxic imagination. But with this story, this is actually a superhero story. It is about a group of individuals that are superheroes. Um, Everybody has their own little power. There's a couple, right? So, the main the story is pretty much based around this couple and just how they deal with like everyday life and tending to themselves as superheroes living in the regular world, right? So if you think about it, it's imagination, but at the same time, it's kind of practical too. Okay, so when we talk about imagination, what is straight imagination? Okay, an example of straight imagination is what's that? Harry Potter. Why would you say Harry Potter? This woman created a whole world, right? She created a world of wizardry, a school, people, a system in this world of around this school of wizardry. And I mean, in the beginning anchors the whole movie because it starts off with practicality, right? Harry Potter's living with his family. His mother and his father passed away. So he's living with his aunt, uncle, and his cousins or whatever. He's being treated a certain way, blah 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 blah. That's practical, right? So then when the story shifts into him going to school, she has created a whole other world. That is imagination. You know what I'm saying? Like everything, she created everything. There are games that they play in this school. She created these games. These are not real games. You know what I'm saying? This is not a real school. You know, the way that they're doing things and experiences that Harry Potter has throughout his time with dealing with the Hogwarts school, it's just like, man, you know, it's just so magical. That's what you call imagination. Now, I'm going to tell you, me personally, I can tell when individuals kind of have borderline toxic imagination because it's kind of like, well, let's not say toxic imagination. Let's talk about escapism. Okay. So, what I've noticed about a lot of artists, entertainers in particular, is that, they like to pull from their experiences, like life experiences, you know, really life experiences, right? And they may create works of art from their experiences, but there's really no imagination involved. It's more so of recreating a memory but recreating it in a way to where maybe something was done and nothing was done about it. Like somebody was wronged and the person didn't get justice. That's what happened in real life, right? So within their artistry, let's say that they create a story to where an individual is wronged and they go unjust, but then later on they get their justice. But in real life, they never got their justice. So, and then sometimes people create artistry to where, they have things to say. They create characters that, in a way, it's kind of like they admire, or maybe they wish they could be, or maybe they had a family member, a friend, and they took to this family member or friends, but they were certain things about their personality that they would change. So their ideal of who they may want this person to be or see, and or their ideal of this person, they project that into their artistry too. So if you think about it, we're not pulling from imagination when we're doing this. Imagination, one component of imagination is magic. And life is very magical. But if you cannot see the magic in life, you're not going to be, when it comes to your imagination, you're not really tapping in. You're not pulling from imagination. It's more so based off of opinions, views, how you want things to go, your ideal. You have intentions for your masterpiece, you have expectations for it, blah, 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 blah. But you're not using imagination. Why? Because there's nothing that you are creating originally. When we are inspired by something, sometimes we want to mimic or copy it, or we become very influenced. Like when it comes to songs and covers, people do covers. I never enjoyed people singing other people's songs. I don't know why. I don't care if the person sings it better than the original, or if they don't sing it better than the original. I've never just been attracted to stuff like that. You know what I mean? But I would imagine myself being on like a feature, you know what I'm saying? And I would say and sing or rap how if I was a feature up there. But I mean, I never really got into all of that. I never really entertained that. You know, um, I love music, you know what I mean? I really do. And I mean, I don't know. I'm not into people singing other people's songs. It's kind of like, well, okay. Because to me, it's kind of like you don't know how to make your own song. You're just piggybacking off of somebody, but you're not really displaying your talent. You see what I'm saying? You're not really, I don't know. If it's like karaoke or you're doing a talent show or something like that, you know what I mean? But I don't know. And some of these people are really good with how they do the covers for these songs, but I'm just like, there's, it's all about originality to me. So there's nothing, you know, I like the original. I like who it came from originally, you know, because God chose that person for that song. I don't care if they got ghostwriters or if they have people writing their stuff. That seals the deal for me even more, because God made sure that that particular message, rather it came from that person or not, it came through and God chose that person to deliver it. I know it's not that serious, but that's just the way I be thinking. You know what I'm saying? For a couple of years, yeah, I would listen to covers and stuff, and you know, they have these music shows like America's Got Talent, American Idol, and you know, everybody's singing other people's songs. How can you choose an artist based off of how they're singing other people's songs? You know, like, I don't know. It just never really made sense to me. You know, like, how do you know what that person is really capable of? You know, if they're not creating something or coming up with something on their own, anybody can practice a song. You know, you could switch it up. You could do this and do that, but I don't know. At the end of the day, it's not yours. It's not you. You know what I'm saying? I don't know. I know it's not that serious, but I'm just saying. Okay. So, I sit here and I talk about original and how I like flaws, right? But there's a part of me that is the perfectionist, right? And I talked about that earlier. Ooh, you know, that's like my shadow self, the perfection. So, yes, I may like somebody and favor their flaws. And it's very rare that I see a human being to where I'm just like, ooh, they're perfect. But I have, you know, I've seen about, I want to say 3 people out of my whole life to where I looked at them and just felt like they were perfect. You know what I mean? So, well, I really want to say one person because the other two, well, I favored their flaws, you know, but they just had less. But there's one person in particular, you know, that I've seen, and I'm just like, oh, you know, that's like pure raw beauty there. You know, like that man is absolutely gorgeous. Even if he is his energy and then his physical. You know what I'm saying? Like he looks like a goddess, you know, and there's nothing that looks feminine about him. You know, he's straight up masculine. Like for real. But you know, I'm just like, whoa, right? So perfection kind of triggers like the shadow aspect of me, right? But so when it comes to things that I think and feel are perfect, you know, then I feel small. You know, I feel small about myself. So, you know, I have learned to let go of the perfectionism, but also appreciate it. And of course, I appreciate it in other people too, because I appreciate that determination and that care. You know, I feel like, you know, when it comes to perfectionism, when you, because it takes time to perfect something, you know, and when you're trying to get it perfect, you know, you want to make sure you want to do it the best that you can. So you're putting a lot of effort, a lot of time, a lot of consideration, you know what I'm saying, into it. You do the same kind of thing sometimes when you're in love with somebody. So, but the thing is that perfectionism is toxic for me to be that way. Okay? Because I can't handle it. Some people can handle it, but honey, I cannot. And I'm true to that. You know, ever since I was a little girl, I've always loved the flaws. Can't help it. But I don't discriminate against the perfection neither. Not at all. I appreciate that too. Okay. So we're going to wrap it up there. And until the next time, we'll talk again. Thank you.